Hello everyone, welcome back to Megha Discourse. And in this video, we are going to cover the part second of chronology from 1751 to 1900. Previously, we covered 1517 to 1750, and I hope you liked that video. And in this video, I do the same. I tried best to assimilate all the PYQs and important writers chronology. So stay connected and keep your notebooks with yourself. Slide on your screen, and we are covering 1751 to 1770 in this slide. Okay, so in 1751 we have elegy written in Country Churchyard by Thomas Gray, and he was the graveyard poet. Okay, and Thomas Gray was born in 1716. We have done it in our first part. So elegy written in Country Churchyard, it was actually a poetic meditation on mortality and the common man. Amelia by Henry Fielding, and Henry Fielding was born in 1707 with Act of Union. So Henry Fielding, he wrote this novel about virtue, mortality and domestic struggle. We have The Adventure of Peregrine Pickle by Tobias Smollett. Tobias Smollett was born in 1721. He was a major novelist, and he wrote satirical picaresque novel. So you can say that he was a picaresque novelist, and he critiqued contemporary manners. Then we have Richard Brinsley Sheridan, who wrote The School for Scandal. Okay, and he was a playwright and politician. Now we have 1752, in which we have The Female Quixote by Charlotte Lennox, and she was supported by Samuel Johnson, and it was very rare at that time. Okay, and it actually a satirical novel of romantic delusions. Then we have Fanny Burney. Fanny Burney, his real name was Frances Burney, and later she was known as Madame Orbley. And Fanny Burney, she wrote Evelina, okay, which was admired by Jane Austen. She focused on social satire and women's life. Then we have Thomas Chatterton, who was a poet and literary forger. He inspired Romanticism despite tragic early death. He was died, I think, in 15 or 16 years of period. Then we have 1753, The History of Sir Charles Grandison, written by Samuel Richardson, and he was born in 1689, and Henry Fielding in 1707. So the History of Sir Charles Grandison was epistolary novel, and epistolary novel means the novel which written in letter form. It explores virtue, morality, and you can say gentlemanly conduct. In 1755, we have a Dictionary of the English Language, and Dictionary of English Language is written by Samuel Johnson, who was born in 1709. So it is the landmark work in English lexicography, and he spent 9 years on this work. And with this work, we have Discourse on the Origin and Basis in Inequality Among Men, written by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He wrote philosophical treatises on social contract and natural rights. So we have Johnson's Dictionary of English Language, and then we have Discourse on Origin and Basis of Inequality Among Men. Alright, then 1756, A Vindication of Natural Society by Edmund Burke, who was critique of organized government, and later he became conservative. Then we have William Godwin, who was the father of Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley was the wife of Percy Shelley. Okay, he was a philosopher and novelist, and he was the husband of Mary Wollstonecraft. Then we have 1757, William Blake, who was a poet, painter, and visionary writer. He combines imagination and social critique. Then we have The Reprisal, written by Tobias Smollett. Again, it was a picturesque and adventure writing. And with that, we have William Whitehead, who became poet laureate in the period. And he was born in 1715. And after Colley Cibber, he was the poet laureate. We have 1759, The History of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia. Okay, with this, I want to tell you that revise the work with subtitle as well. Sometimes they will give you in match the following title and subtitle, and we do not know what type of paper they will set now. And this is written by Samuel Johnson. It is a philosophical tale on human ambition and happiness. Then we have The Life and Opinion of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman. This is the full name of Tristram Shandy, and it was published in 9 volumes. And after 1759, every year 2 or 3 volumes would be published. And it is written by Lawrence Sterne, and this is the only famous work by this writer. It was a comic and aggressive narrative. Then we have The Bee, the periodical, written by Oliver Goldsmith. Okay, only just keep the name in your mind. Then in the same year we have Robert Burns, who was a Scottish national poet. He wrote lyrical poetry and folk influence. Then Mary Wollstonecraft, the wife of William Godwin, and she was the early feminist and advocated women rights and education. And in the same year, we have Dean Mahomet, who was the first Indian English travel writer, and he published in English in Britain. We are moving to 1764. We have Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, and Horace Walpole was born in 1717. Okay, I'm just telling you about the year so that you will remind the previous lecture. And this work is the first Gothic novel. It inspired romantic fascination with the supernatural element. And Radcliffe, who was born in the same year, she was Gothic novelist. Okay, so you can say in 1764 we have many Gothic elements like the Castle of Otranto and Anne Radcliffe. Anne Radcliffe was master of suspense and landscape description. Then we have Mary Lamb, the elder sister of Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb was born in 1775 with Jane Austen. Okay, so Mary Lamb, she co-authored Tales from Shakespeare with Charles Lamb, and we will study in our later slides. Then we have The Traveller by Oliver Goldsmith. Oliver Goldsmith was born in 1728, and it is the poem on society and human behavior. Then we have 1765, in which we have Relics of Ancient English Poetry by Thomas Percy. You can say it was the forerunner of Romanticism. It is the collection of ballad, and it later influenced romantic poets like William Wordsworth and Coleridge. Then we have Sturm and Drang movement. It was German literary movement emphasizing emotion and rebellion. And I think you should know about the very fact that Sturm and Drang movement was propagated by Goethe, Wolfgang Goethe. In our previous lecture, we have studied about that writer. Sturm and Drang means stress and storm movement. Then we have Stamp Act in 1765. Alright, now 1766, The Vicar of Wakefield, very important work by Oliver Goldsmith. So Oliver Goldsmith has the Bee, political essay, and then The Traveller, the poem, and now The Vicar of Wakefield. It is sentimental novel. Last but not the list of the slide, we have this Deserted Village, written in 1717 by Oliver Goldsmith. So the first work, major work, this The Vicar of Wakefield. Then he wrote The Deserted Village. It is the poem on rural depopulation and social change. And in the same year, we have William Wordsworth, the major late poet, the major romantic poet. Okay, so we can say that there is a Thomas Gray elegy written in Country Churchyard. We have Richard Sheridan. Then we have Francis Burney and Thomas Chatterton. And then we have dictionary written by Samuel Johnson, and later William Blake, Robert Burns, Mary Wollstonecraft, Dean Mahomet, and William Wordsworth. And among them we have William Godwin. So you can say that Richard Shelley, Francis Burney, Thomas Chatterton, then William Godwin, William Blake, Robert Burns, and Mary Wollstonecraft, Dean Mahomet, and William Wordsworth. So these are our writers in this series. Okay, dear learners, now we enter 1771 to 1790, that is the second slide, in which literature becomes romantic, political, and revolutionary. So in 1771, we have The Expedition of Humphrey Clinker by Tobias Smollett, again the satirical travel novel, which explores social manners and human folly. Okay, so just keep the name in your mind. Then we have Walter Scott, the major historical novelist like who wrote Waverley, Guy Mannering. Okay, then we have Dorothy Wordsworth, the younger sister of William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth was born in 1770 and Dorothy Wordsworth was in 1771. She was the poet and diarist. We have Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was born in 1772. He was a romantic poet and critic, and he was also the late poet. Then in 1773, we have The She Stoops to Conquer by Oliver Goldsmith, the major work and PYQ. So first he wrote The Bee, the Prodigal, then The Traveller, then The Vicar of Wakefield, and then The Deserted Village. Now She Stoops to Conquer. These are some chronological work written by Oliver Goldsmith. So it was actually the example of comedy of manner. It was critique on social pretension. Then we have Francis Jeffrey, who was critic and founder of Edinburgh Review, and he named William Wordsworth, Astley Coleridge, and Robert Southey the late poet. Okay, then we have Robert Southey, who was born in 1774, the poet laureate. He was a romantic poet and historian. So first we have William Wordsworth, then Dorothy Wordsworth, then Astley Coleridge, Francis Jeffrey, and now Robert Southey. Now we have 1775, in which we have The Rivals by Richard Sheridan. It is the example of the comedy of manner, and Richard Sheridan was born in 1751. The Rivals is a satire on social manner and love. And in the same year, we have Charles Lamb. I told you that Charles Lamb was born in 1775. His elder sister, Mary Lamb, was born in 1764. Okay, then in the same year, we have Jane Austen, Charles Lamb, Jane Austen. So keep it in mind. And with them, we have Walter Savage, born in the same year. He was a poet and essayist. 1776, written. First work we have Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine. Common Sense is important. It was PYQ as well. It pamphlet advocating American independence. It was political writing with revolutionary impact. And in 1777, we have The School for Scandal by Richard Riley. So he first wrote The Rival, then The School for Scandal, and it was the reason of his fame. And this work is the example of comedy of manner. It satirizes gossip and hypocrisy. Lady Teazle, Christopher, Edward, like character in this work. Now, 1778, Evelina by Frances Burney. And Frances Burney was born in 1752. And 1778, she wrote the work Evelina, which was admired by Jane Austen. Epistolary novel, it was satire on society and manner. We have William Hazlitt, and he was the major essayist and critic. Okay, and he was later famous for literary criticism. Now we are moving to 1781, in which we have Lives of the Most Eminent English Poet, written by Samuel Johnson. And in 1755 he wrote the dictionary. And now the Lives of Most Eminent Writer, in which he, I think, explained about 52 or 54 writers. It influenced literary evaluation for generation. 1783, Poetical Sketches by William Blake. It was early collection of poems, combines visionary imagination with social critique. Okay, then we have Washington Irving. And Washington Irving was American essayist and short story writer. Later he was famous for Rip Van Winkle. Then in 1784 we have Leigh Hunt, the major essayist, poet and critique. He wrote liberal essays and literary journalism. Now we have Thomas Warton, who became poet laureate in 1785. Least important, but you should know that after William Whitehead we have Thomas Watson. So far as the major essayists concerned, first we have Charles Lamb, then we have William Hazlitt, now Leigh Hunt and Thomas D. Quincy. So this is in the series. And he was famous for Confession of an English Opium Eater. Then we have Thomas Love Peacock, who was satirical novelist and poet. Okay, and the title Alastair, written by Percy Shelley, and this title was given by Thomas Love Peacock to Percy Shelley's poem because it was published unnamed. Now in 1788 we have George Gordon Byron. He was Lord Byron, romantic poet, famous for lyricism and political engagement. Now we have Mary, a fiction by Mary Wollstonecraft, and Mary Wollstonecraft was born in 1759. Okay, and now in 1788 she wrote the work Mary, a fiction. It was early feministic novel which explores women independent and moral education. A Vindication of Rights of Man by Mary Wollstonecraft. It was political pamphlet against monarchy and aristocracy, and in 1792 she wrote for women. Then we have Reflection on the Revolution in France by Edmund Burke. It was critique on French Revolution, that is in 1798. Again we have The Marriage of Heaven and Hell PYQ by William Blake, and it was visionary poetry and prose which combines mysticism and social critique. So first we have Walter Scott and Dorothy Wordsworth in 1771, then Ashley Coleridge, Francis Jeffrey, in Austen, Charles Lamb and Walter Savage. Then we have William Hazlitt and Washington Irving and Leigh Hunt. We have Lord Byron. So this are our writers' chronology. Okay, so in this slide we have 1719, in which we have Vindication of Right of Man, then Evelina in 1778, She Stoops to Conquer in 1773. Look at the slide twice and thrice and keep it in mind. You will definitely get the, you can say, clue when you look at the options. 1791 onwards, where literature becomes dangerous, writers start questioning religion, monarchy and gender inequality. So first we have Life of Samuel Johnson, written by James Boswell. Okay, and this work is first great modern biography in English literature. It combines factual accuracy with vivid personal detail on life of Johnson. We have Rights of Man, written by Thomas Paine. He defends French Revolution and human equality, and he attacks monarchy and hereditary power. Okay, and Thomas Paine was tried for sedition because of this book. Now 1792 we have Percy by Shelley. Okay, and Percy by Shelley, he was a major romantic poet and rebellion poet for his ideologies, and he was known for political radicalism and lyrical poetry, and he was expelled from Oxford for atheism. Then we have A Vindication of Right of Women in 1792 by Mary Wollstonecraft. In 90 she wrote about men, and in 92 about women. And Mary Wollstonecraft was born in 1759. She argues women need education, not submission. Okay, she attacks patriarchal society, and this takes the foundation of feminism. And this is the first systematic feminist argument in English literature. Now we have 1794, The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. She was born in the year 1764 with Castle of Otranto, and in 1794, after 30 years, she wrote The Mysteries of Udolpho. And The Mysteries of Udolpho, it was a gothic novel with suspense and terror, strong female protagonist. So Radcliffe is called the queen of gothic fiction. Now we have Songs of Innocence and Experience. It was written by William Blake. It was contrasting states of human soul. Innocence means purity and experience means corruption. So it was written in very simple and deep symbolism. William Blake engraved and illustrated his own poems. We have Travels of Dean Muhammad, who was born in 1759, and it was first English Indian travel book. Describes India for European readers, and he was the first Indian author in English. Then in the same year we have The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. It critiques organized religion and it supports deism and rational faith. And this book was banned in many places for being anti-church. Now in 1795 we have John Keats. First we have Percy Shelley, then John Keats. John Keats was a romantic poet, beauty. He has written so many odes, and he was died at the age of 25 because of TB. Then we have Thomas Carlyle in the same year, who was philosopher, historian and critic. He was known for hero worship and moral seriousness. Then we have 1797, in which we have Mary Shelley, the wife of Percy Shelley, and she was a novelist, a gothic novelist. She wrote Frankenstein, important one, and she wrote that novel when she was just 18. Now we have 1798, the time of French Revolution, in which we have lyrical ballad written by Wordsworth and Coleridge. Wordsworth was in 1770 and Coleridge in 1772. And this was the birth text of English Romanticism manifesto, कह सकते हो आप इसे. And they uses simple language, rustic language, common language, and they emphasizes emotion and imagination. And the edition of 1800, it includes romantic manifesto. Then in the same year we have The Rime of Ancient Mariner, as Coleridge has written 4 poems in this first version of lyrical ballad, in which we have The Rime of Ancient Mariner. It was supernatural ballad of guilt and redemption. We have Albatross. Okay, then in 1802 we have Edinburgh Review, written by Francis Jeffrey. He was that person who named them late poet, and he was born in 1773, and it was influential literary and political journal. It shaped literary reputation of romantic writer. Now we have 1803, in which we have Ralph Waldo Emerson, the Transcendentalist writer. He was American essayist and philosopher. Okay, then 1804 we have Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now I try to add some major American writer and their work as well. Okay, so it will become easy for us. Nathaniel Hawthorne, he was American novelist and short story writer. He explores guilt, sin and morality. He was famous for symbolic and psychological fiction. Now we have 1806, who wrote a Compendious Dictionary of the English Language, and it was written by Noah Webster, and Merriam-Webster was the hero of Noah Webster. Okay, just keep it in mind. And you can say that he was the father of American dictionaries. And in the same year we have Fugitive Pieces, written by Lord Byron, who was born in 1788. In the previous slide we read about him. So it was early poetic collection. It shows wit and youthful emotion. Byron later dismissed this work, calling it immature. Now 1807 we have Tales from Shakespeare, written by Charles Lamb with the help of his sister Mary Lamb. Mary Lamb was born in 1764 and Charles Lamb in 1775. Okay, and this work is retelling of Shakespeare for children. It's simplified, complex plot. Okay, and in the same year Washington Irving, he wrote Salma Gundi. It was satirical essay and sketches, American earlier humor writing. Okay, and he popularized American prose style. Now in 1808 we have Faust Part 1, and later then we have Faust Part 2, and this Faust was, you can say, it was famed, it was popularized by John Wolfgang Goethe, who was born in 1749, and he propagated Strum and Drang movement. And in the Faust, it was a tragic drama about knowledge and ambition. Man sells souls to Mephistopheles. Okay. Now, in the same year, we have The Examiner. Actually, The Examiner, the magazine, was founded by John Hunt. He was the brother of Leigh Hunt, but later it was popularized by Leigh Hunt. It was a radical political and literary journal. Before Examiner, we have the Edinburgh Review by Francis Jeffrey. So he had to promote Keats and Shelley poetry in The Examiner. Sometimes you read that it was published in Examiner. Okay. Then we have 1809, in which we have the Quarterly Review by William Guilford, and it was conservative literary journal every type of journal has different taste. They have different type of opinions and different type of works. Okay, and this magazine opposed romantic radicalism. Now we have English Bard and Scottish Review, and it is written by Lord Byron. It is satirical attack on critics and poets. It displays sharp wit. Now we have 1809, in which we have Edgar Allan Poe, Alfred Tennyson and Charles Darwin. Now in 1810 we have Jastruzi, P.B. Shelley's first work. This is the Gothic novel of revenge and obsession. It reflects Shelley's early radicalism, and Shelley rejected Gothic excess in his later life. And with this we have Margaret Fuller, who was born in 1810. She was American feminist and critique, and she was also the editor of the magazine The Dial, because she promoted women's rights and Transcendentalism. That's why the magazine The Dial, which belongs to Transcendentalist movement, she was the major editor of that magazine. So from 1791 to 1810, literature becomes revolutionary, politically, socially. So let's have a look on that in this slide we have Life of Samuel Johnson, written by James Boswell. Then we have Percy by Shelley, then John Keats, and the same year we have Thomas Cadley, we have Mary Shelley. Okay, now we have Emerson, then Nathaniel Hawthorne. In 1809 we have Edgar Allan Poe, Edward Lord Tennyson and Charles Darwin. They all are in 1809. And last but not the least, we have Margaret Fuller. So this is the list of our writer born in this slide. In 1811 we have The Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. She was born in 1775 with Charles Lamb. And Jane Austen, this novel is novel of manner, contrasting reason and emotion. Okay, and she published it anonymously. It combines realism with moral insight. Next we have The Necessity of Atheism by P.B. Shelley. He was expelled from Oxford for this work, and he advocates rational inquiry over blind faith. And in the same year we have William Makepeace Thackeray, the writer of Vanity Fair. Okay, he was major Victorian novelist and satirist. Now in 1812 we have Childe Harold Pilgrimage. It was written by Lord Byron, who introduced Byronic hero who was melancholic and rebellious. It celebrates travel, freedom and disillusionment. Okay, it is semi-autobiographical narrative poem. What? That Byron woke up famous after this publication. It was asked in PYQ as well. Okay, now we have Charles Dickens, born in 1812. He was greatest Victorian novelist known for social realism. And with that we have Robert Browning. So Charles Dickens and Robert Browning in the same year with Necessity of Atheism and Childe Harold Pilgrimage. Okay, now in the next year we have Robert Southey, who became poet laureate, born in 1774. Robert Southey was official poet of England. He wrote long narrative poems and he was one of the lake poets. Here we have Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Jane Austen first she wrote Sense and Sensibility, then Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice we have Darcy, okay, Bennett. This is the novel of manner, love and class. This is sharp social irony. It was first originally titled as First Impression, and the opening line is very important of Pride and Prejudice. Then we have Queen Mab by Shelley. So Shelley first wrote Jastruji, then he wrote The Necessity of Atheism, and now Queen Mab. Okay, so it was radical philosophical poem, attacks monarchy, religion and oppression. And in the same year we have Charles Act in 1813. And if you have not seen the video English in India, then you should watch this video. In that video you will cover your unit English in India. Okay, now in 1814 with Mansfield Park. So first Sense and Sensibility, then Pride and Prejudice, and now Mansfield Park. Jane Austen, she was the master of novel of manner. She focuses on responsibility and ethics. She wrote on marriage, the inequality, social norms. Okay, in 1814 we have Waverley Novel by Walter Scott, who was born in 1771. So Waverley Novels, first historical novel in English. It blends fiction with history, and Walter Scott is called the father of historical novel. Now we have The Excursion, written by William Wordsworth. It was philosophical poem on nature and faith. It was the part of Recluse project. Okay, now in 1815 we have North American Review, the magazine. It was American literary journal which promote criticism and nationalism. Now in the same year we have Emma by Jane Austen. So after Mansfield Park we have Emma, and it was again the novel of self-realization. Heroine learns moral humility. So it is said that Jane Austen said Emma was a heroine, no one but myself, which much like. So you can say it is her autobiographical novel. Now, in this year, we have Guy Mannering by Walter Scott. First he wrote rivalry novels, then Guy Mannering. Both are important, historical and religious novel. And in the same year, we have Alastair, The Spirit of Solitude, and this title is given by Thomas Love Peacock, written by Percy Shelley. And this poem is about isolation and idealism. So after Queen Mab, he wrote Alastair. Okay, so when you read it twice and thrice, and when you look at the slide, and when you look at your notes, okay, recurrently, it will print the image in your mind. Okay, now we have 1816, The Antiquary by Walter Scott. So first he wrote rivalry novels, then Guy Mannering, now Antiquary. Okay, it was historical novel focused on Scottish culture. And in the same time, we have on first looking into Chapman's Homer by John Keats. It was a sonnet celebrating literary discovery, and it expresses poetic awakening. Okay, and it was written overnight after reading Chapman's translation. Now we have Charlotte Bronte. She was born in 1816. So you can say Jane Austen is elder to Charlotte Bronte, and she was Victorian novelist, author of Jane Eyre. Now in 1817 we have Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So now you can revise her work chronologically. So first we have Sense and Sensibility, then Pride and Prejudice, then we have Mansfield Park, Emma, and now Northanger Abbey. Persuasion, it is said that it was published posthumously, so the date may be vary, but yes, it was published during this time. So Persuasion by Jane Austen. Okay, so from this slide you will learn about all the chronology of Jane Austen. It was this mature novel about second chances in marriage. Okay, now we have Rob Roy by Walter Scott, and it was a historical novel on Scottish rebellion. So we can say first rivalry novel, then Guy Mannering, then Antiquary, now Rob Roy. Okay, and now we have Biographia Literaria, written in 1817, the masterpiece of S.T. Coleridge, primary versus secondary imagination, imagination versus fancy, ism plastic. Okay, so foundational text of English literary criticism. It is autobiography and criticism. Okay, it defines imagination and fancy. And now we have Hymn to Intellectual Beauty by Percy Shelley. It celebrates unseen and spiritual power. Henry David Thoreau was born in 1817. Blackwood Magazine, which was conservative literary journal, and it is the rival of Edinburgh Review, was also founded in 1817. So in 1817 we have so many things to remind: Blackwood Magazine, Henry David Thoreau, Biographia Literaria, Hymn to Intellectual Beauty, okay, Rob Roy, etc. Now we are moving to 1818. In this we have The Heart of Midlothian by Walter Scott. After Rob Roy, he wrote The Heart of Midlothian. Important, these are PYQs. And in the same year we have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, the only famous work of Mary Shelley. She was Gothic writer and she explored creation and responsibility. We have Victor in this work. In the same year we have Endymion by John Keats. It is sad, a thing of beauty is joy forever. It is long mythological poem. We have Cynthia, I think. And now we have Karl Marx, born in 1818. He was the writer of Das Kapital, philosopher and political thinker. And I have made a video on literary theory and cultural criticism as well, in which we covered chronology. So watch that video as well. Now we have Emily Bronte, the sister of Charlotte Bronte. Charlotte Bronte was elder. Then we have Emily Bronte. She was the author of Wuthering Heights. So in 1816 we have Charlotte Bronte. 1818 we have Emily Bronte. Now in 1819 we have Peterloo Massacre. And Peterloo Massacre, this is the political violence in England. It inspired radical romantic poetry. And you, I think all are well aware that Shelley, Keats, and many romantic writers, they wrote on Peterloo Massacre. In the same year we have Ivano by Walter Scott. So you can say after Rob Roy, The Heart of Midlothian, and now Ivano. Okay, now we have Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving, the important and short story about time and change. And in the same year we have Don Juan by Lord Byron. First he wrote Childe Harold Pilgrimage, now Don Juan. Les Ballets d'Amson's Mercy by John Keats, and Ode of Keats in this period 1819. It is very important. John Keats wrote Ode to Nightingale, Ode to Gratian, Ode to Autumn, Ode to Psyche, and so many odes. And in the same year Shelley wrote Ode to West Wind. Okay, so this year 1819 is very important, very important. And in this year we have the birth of Walt Whitman, Herman Melville, okay, who was the writer of Moby Dick. So in conclusion we can say that in this year we have Endymion, La Belle d'Amson's Mercy, we have Odes of Keats, we have Odes of Shelley, we have Massacre, Ivano, so and so. Now in 1820 we have Prometheus Unbound by Percy Shelley, lyrical drama of rebellion and freedom. And then we have The Eve of St. Ignace, written by John Keats, sensuous narrative poem. Medieval romance and imagination can be seen in this work. And essay of Elia in magazine form in 1820. Okay, now I want to share one thing, that after magazines, after many journals like Edinburgh Review, The Examiner, now many works they first published in magazines in like you can say serial formation, and later then they were in book form. So do not confuse yourself that this was published in 1823 but now we are reading in 1820. Secondly, it comes into my mind, okay, that Estophilia in 1820 published in magazine, but in book form it was in 1823. Similarly, in later works you will find that first they were published in magazine and later than in book form. Okay, so written by Charles Lamb, it was personal essay, blind nostalgia and humor. After that we have Anne Bronte, the younger sister among Bronte sisters. She was novelist and poet. Okay, this slide is very important. First, the Jane Austen works, Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice. Then we have Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger Abbey and Persuasion. Now we have the works of Walter Scott. First he wrote Vivaldi novels, then Guy Mannering, Antiquary, then Rob Roy, and after that The Heart of Midlothian, Ivano. So these are some important work written by by Walter Scott. Now the work of Lord Byron. First he wrote Childe Harold, Pilgrimage and then Don Juan. Okay, so look at the slide very carefully and revise these twice and thrice. Okay, so 1820 Romanticism does not die, it changes its tone. Now we have personal suffering, Romanticism, essay, and you can say realism slowly, which replaces lyrical excess. So in 1821 to 1836 it is a bridge from romantic passion to Victorian intellect. Now in 1821 we have Adonis by P.B. Shelley. It was elegy on death of John Keats, Chapman and many more writers. It inspired by Milton's Lycidas. Okay, and it blends personal grief with idealism. And in the same year we have Table Talk by S.T. Coleridge, and it was informal conversational recorded by followers. It covers philosophy, literature and religion. It shows the side of Coleridge who works as thinker. Now in the same year we have Confession of an Opium Eater, but in magazine form, and in 1822 it was in book form, written by Thomas De Quincey. Thomas De Quincey was born in 1785. Okay, and it was autobiographical account of opium addiction. It was the first major literary work on addiction. Now we have 1822 we have The Vision of Judgment by Lord Byron, and before that he wrote Don Juan. It is the satirical poem mocking political hypocrisy and attacks Sunday and conservative morality. Okay, and Byron uses humor as political weapon. Again I'm saying in 1820 we have Confession of an English Opium Eater in book form. It was expanded and revised version. Now in the same year we have Matthew Arnold. Now The Triumph of Life by Percy Shelley. It was unfinished and philosophical poem. So it can be asked that which one is the unfinished work of P.B. Shelley. So you should know The Triumph of Life, and it was published in 1822. Now Essay of Elia in book form, and in magazine we have 1820. Okay, and Essay of Elia, it is personal essay full of nostalgic and humor, and Elia is Lamb's pen name. Then we have On the Knocking at the Gate in Macbeth by Thomas De Quincey. First Confession, then On the Knocking. Okay, now we have 1824 in which we have the Westminster Review. The Westminster Review is founded in the 1824, and it was radical and reformist journal. It supported utilitarian and progressive ideas. Now in 1825 we have The Spirit of the Age, written by William Hazlitt, PYQ, and it is critical essays on writers and thinker, and William Hazlitt is known for psychological criticism. Now let's move to 1828 in which we have Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Now in 1829 we are moving to the poem Timbuktu by Alfred Tennyson, who was born in 1809 with Charles Darwin, okay, and Edgar Allan Poe. And this poem, written for a university prize, it early displays for poetic ambition, and it marked the beginning of Tennyson's career. Okay, now 1830 we have Emily Dickinson, who was an American lyric poet, and there is a collection poems in which the major works was collected. And you know what, that most of the poems was published after her death. Now 1833 we have Alfred Nobel. After the name we have Nobel prizes every year. So he was the inventor and philanthropist. He was founder of Nobel Prize. Okay, and all right, then 1835 we have Mark Twain, who was the founder of The Adventure of Huckleberry Finn. And in the same year we have Samuel Butler, who was the novelist and critic who questioned Victorian morality. So in 1835 we have Mark Twain and Samuel Butler. Now 1836 we have The Pickwick Paper, the first work of Charles Dickens. It is episodic novel full of humor and realism, and Charles Dickens was born in 1812. Okay, and it made Dickens instantly famous. Okay, now we have Nature by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It was Transcendentalist work. It was essay promoting Transcendentalism, emphasizing self-reliance and nature. And Ralph Waldo Emerson was born in 1803, and after that we have Nathaniel Hawthorne. We have Robert Browning works, Prophetia's Lover. And Robert Browning was also born in 1812 with Charles Dickens. They both were born in same year and they both published in the same year. And it was dramatic monologue which exploring obsession. And he was a speaker, reveals psychological instability. Okay. And you are well aware that Robert Browning pioneered the dramatic monologue form. Let's have a look on the slide that in 1821 we have Adonis, then Vision of Judgment by Lord Byron, and in the same year we have the Confession of an English Opium Eater, book form as well as in magazine form. And with the 1822 we have the Triumph of Life and Matthew Arnold. So let's have a look on the writers. So first we have Matthew Arnold, then Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and Mark Twain, Samuel Butler, and between them we have Emily Dickinson. Okay, so these were the writer. And in 1824 we have the Westminster Review. Okay, and the Pickwick Paper and Prophetia's Lover, they were published in the same year, and the writers of these works respectively, they born in the same year. Okay, so this is important thing in our slide. Let's move year by year through 1837 to 1850. It was the age of Victorian. 1837, the rule of Victoria. Victorian age begins. Okay, and in this period we have Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. First he wrote Pickwick Paper and now Oliver Twist. It was a social novel exposing child labor and poverty. It is one of the novel with a child hero. Now 1839 we have Nicholas Nickleby, Charles Dickens' next work, and it attacks corrupt educational institution. Okay, so he talks about poverty and educational institution. Social cruelty of Yorkshire School. In the same year we have the fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. First he published Nature, now the fall of House of Usher. Both are very important. It is Gothic story of decay and madness. It is classical example of Gothic symbolism. And in the same year we have Walter Pater, who was aesthetic critic. He was famous for art and art's sake, aesthetic movement. Okay, so you have to remind that with fall of Usher we have Walter Pater. Now let's move to 1840, in which we have Thomas Hardy. He was known for tragic vision of life. And in the same year we have Emile Zola, who was the founder of naturalism, for novel Nana. And then we have the Dial magazine and the Margaret Fuller session. I told you that she was the editor of the Dial, the Transcendental magazine. Okay, so in 1840 we have Thomas Hardy, Emile Zola, and the Dial. Now let's move to 1841, in which we have Deerslayer by James Fenimore Cooper. Okay, I put this work because I want to tell you that James Cooper was famous for Deer-stalking tales, in which we have 5 works. Among 5 novels we have the Deerslayer. Okay, it was frontier adventure novel, explores wilderness and heroism. So just look at the work Deer-stalking tales. Okay, in the Review Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe. He was born in 1809 with Charles Darwin and Alfred Lord Tennyson. It was the first modern detective story, and you can say that he gives the birth to detective fiction. And with this we have Pippa Passes by Robert Browning. Dramatic poem influenced dramatic monologue. Now let us move ahead to 1842. The Transcendentalist by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Nature, then the fall of Usher, now the Transcendentalist. It is the essay defining transcendental philosophy. Now in 1843 we have Henry James, who was the novelist of psychological realism. He propounded interior monologue. Okay, then we have William Wordsworth, who became poet laureate in 1843 after Robert Southey. So you can say it was the symbolic end of romantic dominance. Now let us have 1845, in which we have Suspiria de Profundis, important work by Thomas de Quincey. So we have read about Confession on the Knocking Gate, and now Suspiria de Profundis. It is companion to Opium Eater. Now in the same time we have the Ravan by Edgar Allan Poe. It is narrative poem of grief and obsession, and it made Edgar Allan Poe internationally famous. Now let us move to 1846, in which we have Typee by Herman Melville, who was also the writer of Moby Dick. It is some semi-autobiographical travel novel. Now in 1847 we have Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. It was realistic novel of governance life. Okay, and then we have Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte. And in 1847 those sisters, they published their work. Like Charlotte Bronte published Jane Eyre, which is Bill Dixon roman of a women's self-respect, and Emily Bronte published Wuthering Height, okay, the novel of passion and revenge. So in 1847 we have Wuthering Height, Jane Eyre, and Agnes Grey. Same year we have The Princess by Edward Lord Tennyson. It is poem on women's education. So it is our PYQ, that which work of Alfred Lord Tennyson governs the women education. Now in 1848 the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was founded, and in the same period we have the tenet of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. She was bold feminist novelist, okay, and attacks alcoholism and patriarchy in this work. Now we have Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. After Pickwick Paper, Nicholas Nickleby, we have Dombey and Son. It focuses on family and pride. And we have Mary Barton, written by Elizabeth Gaskell. It was industrial novel, and it shows working class suffering. And in the same year, we have the Communist Manifesto, written by the Karl Marx, who was born in 1818. Okay, so 1848 is very important. You know, some years are very important in which we have multiple writings. So 1848 is like that, 1819 is like that. Okay, and in the same year we have Vanity Fair, and the subtitle is Novel Without a Hero. Okay, in the serial, or you can say in the magazine, it was published as Vanity Fair, and the subtitle is different from this. And in the book we have Vanity Fair, a novel without a hero, and it was written by Thackeray, who was born in 1811. It is a satirical novel of society. 1849. In 1849 we have Resistance to Civil Government, or you can say Civil Disobedience, which is written by Henry David Thoreau. It was actually an essay on moral resistance to unjust laws. Influenced Gandhi and Martin Luther. Okay, and now we have 1850, the magazine Germ, which is the magazine of Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, promoted art and poetry. And in the same year we have David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which is semi-autobiographical novel. In 1850 we have The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne in 1804. Born, okay, it was novel of sin and guilt. We have Hester Prynne, okay, and it was set in Puritan society. And in the same year we have Sonnet from Portuguese by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, okay, and we have major works in 1850. Similarly we have In Memoriam by A.H.H. It was on the death of Arthur Hallam. It explores grief, faith, doubt, and it was liked by Victoria as well. So, and we have The Prelude. It was published by William Wordsworth, autobiographical epic poem. And also the Alfred Lord Tennyson become poet laureate with this poem In Memoriam. Okay, he is the voice of Victorian poetry. So we can say that the major writings we can find in this second part of this video. So let's have a look again. So first we have Oliver Twist and Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield. Okay, so these are the works of Charles Dickens. We have Thomas Hardy, Emile Zola in this period. We have the Dial magazine, we have the Germ, which was the magazine of Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Like in 1848 we have the tenet of Whitfall Hall, Dombey and Son, Mary Barton's the Communist Manifesto. Okay, similarly in 1847 we have works of all Bronte sister like Agnes Grey, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights with The Princess by Tennyson. Okay, so all right, so have a look on the slide. Now we are moving to 1851 to 1865. Now 1861 we have The House of Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. After Scarlet Letter he wrote The House of Seven Gables. Focuses on moral inheritance and decay, and you can say it was the companion novel to The Scarlet Letter. And in the same year we have Moby Dick by Herman Melville. It was a symbolic novel of obsession and revenge. Initially it was a failure, but it became a masterpiece. Now 1852 we have The Blithedale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So first we have The Scarlet Letter, then The House of Seven Gables, and now The Blithedale Romance. And it was based on utopian experiment. It explores idealism and reality. Now in the same year we have Uncle Tom's Cabin, important, and PYQ by Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was actually an anti-slavery novel, exposed cruelty of slavery. It influenced American Civil War sentiment. Now we are moving to The History of Henry Esmond by William Makepeace Thackeray. After Vanity Fair, he wrote this masterpiece. It is a historical novel written in 18th century prose style. Now 1853 we have Villette by Charlotte Bronte. After Jane Eyre, she published this work, and it is psychological novel of loneliness, and it is semi-autobiographical. Now we have Bleak House by Charles Dickens. After David Copperfield we have Bleak House. So it attacks on judicial corruption. Sometimes he wrote work which attacks on poverty, on education. Now it attacks on corruption, judicial corruption. Okay, so you should know that particular works, you should know about these particular works, that this work is on judicial corruption, this work is on poverty, this work on women education. Okay, now we have The Scholar Gypsy by Matthew Arnold, and he was born in 1822. It was pastoral elegy and escapism from modern life. Now in 1854 we have Hard Times, written by Charles Dickens. It was industrial novel and utilitarian Education. We have The Charge of Light Brigade by Alfred Tennyson. It is war poem on Crimean War. It celebrates bravery. And in 1854 we have Walden or Life in the Woods by Henry David Thoreau. It is philosophical reflection on simple living. It is transcendental text and it was very famous. And we have Oscar Wilde, who was known for his wit and satire. He was later known as the aesthetic movement leader. And so we can say that in 1854 we have major writings. Now we are moving to 1855, in which we have North and South by Elizabeth Kessel, PYQ. It is industrial conflict novel. It is based on class struggle and reconciliation. Then we have Westward Ho by Charles Kingsley. You know what, there are many works of these writers, but I just picked out those which are important one. Okay, and it was historical adventure novel, Imperial Optimism. Now in the same year, 1855, we have Leaves of Grass written by Walt Whitman. Free verse poetry celebrates self and democracy. In 1856, we have Aurora Leigh by Elizabeth and Barrett Browning. It was actually a verse novel, female and artistic independence. Verse means poem novel written in poetic lines. Then we have Toru, the important writer, born in 1856, Indo-Anglican poet, blended Indian themes with English verse. And in the same year, we have G.B. Shaw. He was later Nobel laureate, and he was a dramatist and social critique. And with George Bernard Shaw, we have Sigmund Freud, who was founder of psychoanalysis. He influenced literary criticism. So you can say George Bernard Shaw, Sigmund Freud, and Toru Dutt, they were born in the same year, 1856. Now we have 1857, in which we have Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, important work. It is actually the realist novel of disillusionment, and it critiques on romantic fantasies. And in the same year, we have Ferdinand de Saussure, who was a linguistic and founder of structuralism of 1857. That is the first war of independence, major colonial rising influenced Indo-English writing. So we can say with 1857, first we have first war of independence. Okay, then we have Ferdinand de Saussure and Madame Bovary. Okay, so make some mnemonics so that you can revise that work easily. Now we have 1859, in which we have Charles Darwin theory, origin of species. With we have A Tale of Two Cities, in which London and Paris was explained. Historical novel on French Revolution. Have Adam Bede by George Eliot. It is realist rural novel, moral psychology based. And Family Happiness by Leo Tolstoy, important psychological novel. Actually, it is psychological novella. It see marriage and emotional growth in this work. And The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. And with that we have A. Houseman, who was the poet of melancholy and loss. And in this we have All the Year Round, which is the magazine founded by Charles Dickens for his serialization. It is weekly literary magazine, and it is very important to note down. So we can say in 1859 we have A. Houseman on The Origin of Species, we have Family Happiness, All the Year Round, and the work of A Tale of Two Cities, etc. Let's move to 1861, in which we have The Great Expectation by Charles Dickens. It is Bildungsroman and on social mobility and guilt. In the same year, we have Silas Marner by George Eliot. Then we have Rabindranath Tagore, who was born in 1861. He was poet and philosopher and Nobel laureate, become in 1913. Now we have 1862, in which we have Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, important work by Victor Hugo. It was a social justice novel. It is on Lie and Mercy. Okay, then we have Unto This Last, important work, social critique of capitalism, and Mahatma Gandhi admired this work, Unto This Last, by John Ruskin. And in the same year we have Goblin Market and other poems by Christina Rossetti, who was the member of Pre-Raphaelite movement. It was symbolic and feminist reading. Now we have 1865, in which we have Durgesh Nandini by Bankim Chand Chattopadhyay, important work, first historical Indian novel. That's why it is very important. And in the 1865 we have Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. हमारा PYQ है. It was fantasy and nonsense literature, actually a children novel. And in the same year, we have Essay in Criticism by Matthew Arnold, who defined Victorian criticism. And we have W.B. Yeats, who was Irish poet and later modernist bridge. And now we have Rudyard Kipling, who was imperial poet and storyteller. With that we have Drum Taps. It is very important here. Okay, we have Drum Taps. We have actually a Civil War poem written by Walt Whitman. It is I think collection of poems. And then we have the Fortnightly Review, intellectual. It publishes the liberal and progressive ideas. So in 1865 we have major works like Durgesh Nandini, Alice's Adventure, Essay in Criticism, Drum Taps, Rudyard Kipling, W.B. Yeats. Okay, so have a revision of the slide that in we have A star from the House of Seven Gables, Moby Dick, and it ends with Durgesh Nandini. We have Tale of Two Cities in 1859 with Charles Darwin theory, and then we have Torudat and Aurora League, George Bernard Shaw, Sigmund Freud in the same year 1856. We have Hard Times, The Charge of Light Brigade in 1854, and Walden in 1854. In 1855 we have Leaves of Grass. Okay, so have a look on that, okay, and revise it properly. Now, in 1866, we have Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, very important work. It is a psychological novel about guilt and morality, and it explores crime, conscience, and redemption. And it is the example of psychological realism. And in the same year, we have H.G. Wells, who was the pioneer of science fiction, The Invisible Man. And now we have 1868, in which we have The Moonstone PYQ by Wilkie Collins. It was sensational novel and detective fiction. It uses multiple narratives, and it is considered as the first modern English detective novel. Modern English. Okay, now we have 1869, in which we have Lorna Doone, written by R.D. Blackmore, PYQ. It is historical romance and combines adventure with pastoral setting. Then we have War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, and it was epic novel, Russian society. It is based on war, history, and personal fate. It called a novel of ideas and history. Okay, then we have Culture and Anarchy by Matthew Arnold, first hero has in criticism, now Culture and Anarchy. And Matthew Arnold was born in 1822. It was critical prose on society and education. It advocates cultural balance. Now we have The Subjection of Women. It is written by John Stuart Mill. He was feminist. It is actually feminist philosophical essay and argues for gender equality. So it was a very important work. Now in 1870, we have The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Charles Dickens. It is unfinished mystery novel, an important one. Themes of crime and dual identity can be seen, and he died before completing it. Now we have The Wants and Means of India by Dadabhai Naoroji, important work. It is economic critique of British rule, introduced the Drain theory. Now in 1871, we have Lady Susan by Jane Austen, and actually it was epistolary novella. It is satirical portrait of manipulative women. She wrote it and she died. Then and this work was published posthumously. And we have Middlemarch, written by George Eliot, who it was actually a realist novel of provincial life. It is psychological. It explains psychological depth and moral complexity. So it was, you can say, the greatest English novel. And we have W.H. Davies, who was Georgian poet known for simple lyricism. Theodore Dreiser, an American naturalist novelist. So in this year, we can find that we have Lady Susan, Middlemarch, W.H. Davies, and Theodore Dreiser. Now let's move to 1872. We have Erewhon, written by Samuel Butler, satirical utopian novel. And Samuel Butler was born in 1835. We have read in this slide. And then we have Under the Greenwood Tree by Thomas Hardy, who was born in 1840. And it was pastoral novel, depicts rural English life. Now we are moving to 1874, in which we have Far From Madding Crowd. Far From Madding Crowd is written by Thomas Hardy after Under the Greenwood. It was a tragic rural romance. It was based on fate and human suffering. Now we have Gertrude Stein. Okay, he was modernist writer, influenced experimental prose. Now Robert Frost, he was a poet of rural life, and W. Somerset Maugham, he was novelist and short story writer. So we can say in 1874 we have three writers, the major three writers, Robert Frost, Gertrude Stein, and Somerset Maugham. With we have Far From Madding Crowd. Now 1875 we have Satyarth Prakash by Swami Dayanand Saraswati, very important work. It was a religious and reformist text, advocates Vedic values. Now we have Atlantic Sketches. It is written by Anthony Trollope. It is travel essays and it observes American society. And moving to 1876, in which we have The Adventure of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and then he wrote The Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, because in which we have the character Tom Sawyer. It was childhood adventure novel, combines humor with realism. Now 1878, we have Anne Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, very important work. It is psychological realism, love, marriage, and society type idea can be seen. And the opening line is very important of Anne Karenina, so note it down. And now 1879, we have A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen, problem play, and it challenges marriage and patriarchy. PYQ. Then we have E.M. Forster, who was born in 1879. So with Doll House we have E.M. Forster. And then we have Sarojini Naidu. Okay, she was Indian lyric poet and known as the Nightingale of India, and Otto Nightingale is written by John Keats. Now we have 1880, in which we have Nana, written by Emile Zola, who was the founder of naturalism. It is actually naturalist novel. It is on heredity and environment. Okay, now we have Vera, or the Nihilist, written by Oscar Wilde, a later aesthetic movement leader. It is political drama. It is his early work before his comedies. Now 1881, we have The Portrait of Lady by Henry James, he used interior monologue in this work. It is psychological realism, and he shows individual freedom and society's perspective. And in the same year, we have Ghost by Henry Ibsen. It was controversial work and problem play. It is based on social hypocrisy and heredity. So first he wrote A Dollhouse, then Ghost. Okay, so have a look on these works actually in the last time. Now we have Reminiscence by Thomas Carlyle, who was autobiographical reflections, and it shows insight into Victorian intellectual life. And he was born in 1795. So we find Crime and Punishment, Anne Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. We have The Portrait of Lady by Henry James, and The Mystery of Edwin Drood, the incomplete work of Charles Dickens. Then we have The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, The Wants and Means of India by Dadabhai Naoroji, in which he gives the drain theory. And we have Transcendental Sketches by Anthony Trollope and Satyarth Prakash. Okay, so these are some major works of this slide. And we have 1882 to 1892, and 1882 we have Anand Mant. Before we have Durgesh Nandini by Bankim Chand Chattopadhyay. Anand Mant, in which we have, it is the early political novel in India. It introduced the song Vande Mataram, inspired Indian freedom movement. Okay, now we have The Prince and the Pauper. It is written by Mark Twain, historical novel of identity exchange. Then Virginia Woolf was born with Anand Mant, modernist novelist, essayist, and James Joyce. Both are the proponent of stream of consciousness, and both born in same year. Okay, so you can keep it in mind that Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, Anand Mant, they are in same year. Now we have Mahabharat, which was English translation by Kesari Mohan Ganguly. Important, and I think it is PYQ. It was first complete English translation, and it made Indian epic accessible to the West. Now we have Life on Mississippi by Mark Twain. It is memoir and travel narrative. It blends history with humor. Okay, now we have 1884, Adventure of Huckleberry Finn. First we have The Adventure of Tom Sawyer, now Huckleberry Finn. It was written by Mark Twain. It is critique on racism and society. It called the Great American Novel. 1885, in which we have The Marriage Epicurean by Walter Pater, philosophical novel, and it explains art for art's sake. And we have the magazine Germinal by Emile Zola. It explains the naturalist novel of Manners. It explains the brutal realism of working class. With that, we have Sinclair Lewis. He became Nobel Prize winner later in life, and he was American realist and novelist. Okay, so keep it in mind. Then Germinal and Sinclair Lewis, they are in 1885, and we have Marriage the Epicurean in the same year. And with Sinclair Lewis, we have D.H. Lawrence and Ezra Pound. All are very important. 1886, we have The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. And then we have Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, important, and PYQ by R.L. Stevenson. It is psychological gothic novella. It is on dual nature of man. And in this work, he studied about split personality. Now we have The Power of Darkness by Leo Tolstoy, and after Anne Karenina and War and Punishment, we have The Power of Darkness. Now we have H.D. Hilda Doolittle, who was imagist poet, and she wrote with symbolist thought. Okay, 1887, we have The Study in Scarlet by Arthur Doyle, and it is the first Sherlock Holmes novel, and we find the birth of scientific detective fiction. So you can say that he invented the character Sherlock Holmes in A Study in Scarlet. Very important fact. In 1888, we have Wessex Tale, and Wessex Tales is written by Thomas Hardy. In the same year, we have Plain Tales from the Hills by Rudyard Kipling, and T.S. Eliot was born in the same year, and Catherine Mansfield, important writer, she was modern short story writer, was born with T.S. Eliot and Eugene O'Neill, who was American dramatist. Okay, written Harriet. So T.S. Eliot, Catherine Mansfield, Eugene O'Neill, they are in same year, and we have Plain Tales from the Hills, and then Wessex Tales in the same year. We have News from Nowhere by William Morris, utopian socialist novel, and with that we have The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Again, it is an aesthetic novel. It shows art and reality, morality. Okay, and now we have The Lake Isle of Innisfree by W.B. Yeats, lyric poem of escape and peace, very important writing, and it is on Irish revival tone. Now in 1891, we have Tess of the Babels, very important, by Thomas Hardy, tragic feminist novel, victim of social hypocrisy. And in the same year, we have Zora Neale Hutchinson, African American novelist and the founder figure of Harlem Renaissance. And in 1892, we have The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes, Study in Scarlet, and this is the continuation of that work. It is collection of detective stories. It is based on logic, observation, and deduction. Okay, so you can say that it is a short detective story. Many major works in this video, and this video is very important. Please have a look on all these works, and this is our last slide in which we are covering 1893 to 1900. And we have 1893, in which the work Maggie, A Girl of the Streets by Stephen Crane. He was a naturalist novel of urban poverty. It shows environment shaping destiny. It was early American naturalism text. And in the same year, we have The Refugees by Arthur Doyle. It was a historical novel, and it is based on religious persecution backdrop. Now we have A Woman of No Importance, important work by Oscar Wilde. It is actually social comedy and hypocrisy of Victorian morality. And Oscar Wilde was born in 1854. And now we have Wilfred Owen, the war poet of World War I. He was known for realism and pity of war. And in the literary movement series, the top 25 literary movement lecture, I have told you about the war poetry of 1 and 2 and about the Wilfred Owen as well. Now we have 1894, in which we have Pudd'nhead Wilson by Mark Twain, important work. It is novel on identity and race, and he uses fingerprint signs in this work. Okay, so this is the important fact about the work. And we have Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, and he was born in 1865. And this is a story in Indian jungle. Colonial and moral themes can be seen in this work. And with the Jungle Book, we have Arms and the Man by George Bernard Shaw. It is anti-romantic war comedy, and it satirizes heroism. We have Chocolate Hero in this play actually. Then we have Aldous Huxley, who was born in the same year. He was novelist and thinker, and later become dystopian fiction novelist. So in 1894, we have the Jungle Book, Arms and the Man, and Aldous Huxley. Now in 1895, we have Almar's Folly, the first work of Joseph Conrad. It was colonial novel, and it shows cultural conflict and isolation. Now we have Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. It was tragic novel, and it was actually critic of marriage and education. And you know what, that Jude the Obscure is the controversial work of Thomas Hardy. Now we have The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, born in 1866. It was the science fiction novella, social evolution and dystopian work. Okay. Now we have The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. There are many works written by Oscar Wilde. It is based on comedy of manner. It has wit and satire. So you can say it is the peak of aesthetic comedy. Now we have F.R. Lewis, who was literary critic, and he is known for moral seriousness. Okay, so he was born in the year in which we have The Importance of Being Earnest. So you can revise it like The Importance of Being Earnest and F.R. Lewis. We have Friedrich Engels, Marxist philosopher, okay, who wrote Communist Manifesto with Karl Marx. Now we have Robert Graves. So you can say Friedrich Engels, F.R. Lewis, Robert Graves, they all are in 1895. He was poet and novelist. And then we have The Red Badge of Courage, written by Stephen Crane, important work. It is actually psychological war novel. Now we have 1896, in which we have The Seagull, important work by Anton Chekhov. It is based on modern realist drama. And we find failure, art and desire in this work. Now The Shropshire Lad by A. Houseman. It is lyrical poem, and this is very important. PYQ hamara bahut time, and it is PYQ mostly asked. Now we have F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was born in 1896, modern American novelist, and he was the voice of Judge Age. Now 1897, I know this is very long video. Thank you for your patience. And 1897, this is The Niger of the Narcissus, important work by Joseph Conrad. First he wrote Almar's Folly, then this work. It is a maritime novel. Actually, it is based on collective psychology. Now we have The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. First he wrote The Time Machine, now The Invisible Man. And then we have William Faulkner, who was born in this year. So F. Scott Fitzgerald is elder to William Faulkner. Now we have 1899, The Awakening by Kate Chopin, feminist novel. Okay, so it presents female independence. Then we have Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad in 1850. And Joseph Conrad was born in 1857 with Mutiny War. And this work is based on colonial works, and it presents darkness of human soul. So The Awkward Age by Henry James, who wrote a portrait of a young lady. It is based on social realism and moral ambiguity. Now we have Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy. There are many important works by Leo Tolstoy. Okay, moral and spiritual novel based on social injustice. Look at the title. Now we have Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud, in which we have unconscious mind psychoanalytical theory, and he was the founder of psychoanalytic criticism. Now we have Ernest Hemingway, who was the modernist writer, and he has given the iceberg theory. Okay, so have a look on the iceberg theory as well. And okay, the ice is above the water, and we do not know that how much ice is under the water. So say that depth is very important. At the last year of this part, in which we have Lord Jim by Joseph Conrad, and it is based on moral dilemma and guilt. It is based on psychological realism. And Sister Carrie by Theodore Dreiser was born in 1871. It's a naturalist novel and based on urban ambition and desire. This is our today's lecture. We have covered many important works, and many writers measure chronology with this chronology. Okay, and thank you for the patience. And you have to read all these works very carefully and watch this video 2 or 3 times. You will definitely get the idea. And thank you for your support, and share it more and more with your friends. And if you like this lecture, then hit the bell icon. Bye bye. We will meet in the next part 3.